Hi everyone, and welcome to this edition of the Keptn developer meeting. Thanks everyone for joining. As usual, please put in your name on the attendee list so we can keep track of attendees. And also please follow our CNCF code of conduct. That basically means please be nice to each other in our community and developer meetings. We got a couple of agenda items for today. If you have anything more to add, please add it to the agenda or add it to the agenda for next week if we cannot address it for today. Since the first agenda item is already assigned with my name, I briefly talk about this. As you might know, we have already been participating in the Linux Foundation mentorship program that was previously called the Community Bridge, and we had a mentorship for 2 mentees. And this mentorship program is now basically renamed to LFX mentorship, and Keptn is planning again to participate in this program. The application period just started, just opened up today for projects, and we will basically participate with 1 or 2 projects. So please reach out or check the CNCF mentoring page on GitHub if you're interested in joining us or becoming a mentee in the Keptn project. And we hope we have some very interesting, I'm pretty sure we have some very interesting projects that we can offer, and where we offer mentorships on your first journey into CNCF projects, probably also into open source contributions. So we will have more updates in the coming weeks as we are also developing our project descriptions. But just as a heads up, we are already working on this. Next agenda item is Christian.
Jürgen,
Yes.
just one note. I think we should mention that Ankit, our mentee from the last quarter, published a blog post this week about his experience in this program. For everyone who wants to be a mentee,
yes.
Please read the blog post.
I will link it here. It's a very nice blog from Ankit. You might know him from the developer meetings as well. Thanks for mentioning this, Johannes. So I will just also add this here, previous experience report. Here we go. Okay, are there any other questions, or not question, but remarks on this first agenda item? Okay, all good. I will be handing over to Christian. Do you want to share a screen, Christian, or do you want just to highlight it here?
I think it's enough if I just talk about it quickly. So a couple of weeks ago, we have published Keptn 080 Alpha. And obviously, we've published release notes. But if you just want to have a quick summary of what's new in Keptn 080 Alpha, then there's 2 YouTube videos I recommend watching. The first one linked in here is basically the highlights based on the release notes that we've created with Keptn with this version. And the second video in this list is a quick introduction into the new shipyard specification that we've published with 080 Alpha. Both videos are targeted for developers, not necessarily end users. So if you're just an end user, hang tight until we have the final release. But if you're a developer or if you're building integrations with Keptn, then those 2 videos are for you.
Thank you. Are there any questions on those videos? Not yet. Okay, cool. So I will be handing over probably to Johannes to quickly talk about.
It's also just a quick announcement. Currently, there are a couple of discussions going on around the Keptn project and also in regard to the 0.8 release for the final version. And if you want to contribute or also want to bring in your opinion on certain topics, please feel free to follow those discussions and to post a comment there. We are very happy to see other ideas, thoughts, and concerns that we then can also consider when building certain features. The first discussion is about how execution plane services should behave and how they should get their events. Then today we started a discussion about whether it's necessary to have a mapping between a service and a sequence, or we should provide smart defaults. And the third discussion is about the situation that a task about the behavior of a task sequence and whether it should fail based on a failed task or not. Yeah, please also take a look there. Thanks to Christian who provided the first or the introduction into this discussion. Please take a look and feel free to post a comment. All right, yeah, and there's Jürgen, you brought in this item about the working group on low-cost.
It's right now we are basically starting the discussion. It's we are in the process of starting an integration for low-cost, which is a load testing tool similar to JMeter, for example. And we are reaching out in Slack to find folks that would be interested in joining us in the development. We have already found some. And so we are initiating this. We will start first gathering the requirements and then start coding in the next weeks. This should already be a service that should be developed for Keptn 0.8. So this would be a great start to also get familiar with the new version of Keptn. And I think I have it in my clipboard here. So this is right now the discussion that we are having, and you can also find the link to the Git repository where we will start the development. So yeah, I think that's everything for this agenda item. And the next one is an open question from the last meeting. Should we streamline the versioning of the spec with the Keptn versions? Very good question. Did anyone already has established or do we already have some conclusion how to answer this question? Or we just keep it for now, we keep it as an open question? I think the question came up because the spec is now developed in, sometimes we have spec version 0.2, but Keptn has 0.8. Actually, in my opinion, it makes sense to have different versions of the spec and the implementation. If you progress with minor versions, we won't change the spec for minor versions probably. So it can live with two separate version definitions, in my opinion.
I think so too, because we had this discussion also on the level of the services, and we also decided to keep the services separated, even though it's you need then a matrix that tells you which version of service is working with which version of Keptn. But at the end, or at some point in time, it will not be possible to have everything aligned at the same version, and it will run away. Yeah, based on that, I think that we will keep two separate versions.
I agree on that in principle, but we should make sure the versioning we use is semantic. So with the changes we've done now with Keptn 0.8.0, we obviously also made a jump in the minor version of the spec, which is fine. But let's just say we at some point release Keptn 1.0. Then I believe the spec should also be 1.0, because the spec in that sense is to be considered general availability and production ready. I don't know how to call it, but I guess you know what I mean. So maybe we need to align at some point, but that might create confusion again, whatever. But this could be the one way that we go with the spec version.
Okay, but if there are no objections, so I try to find or to write down a conclusion. In general, keep it with separate versions. But for major versions, we have to align G Keptn 0.0 is to implement spec 0.1. Something like this. Does that make it clear?
Or when there's a breaking change in the specification, then this breaking change should also be reflected by a breaking change of the Keptn version, so to say. When we jump from spec 0.1 to 0.2, then it's a breaking change in Keptn.
We'll introduce breaking change Keptn. Does that make sense? Should we keep it like this?
Yeah, sounds right.
Cool. So we can kind of close this question. Then if there are no more questions on this, I will hand over to Christian to share his the Keptn service template.
Thanks. Okay, so my contributions for the last couple of days, they start with the Keptn service template. I have taken the task to make sure that the new cloud events are also available in the new or in the existing Keptn service template. And this task has proven to be quite some work, because in our event handlers.go, we had handler functions for almost every task or for almost every cloud event that Keptn 0.7 had. And now with the introduction of all the .started and .finished events, and even some more cloud events in Keptn 0.8, there was quite some work involved. So I'm not going to go through all the details in here. I'm just going to go through the rough edges of the things that I had to do. And I just want to mention that there will also be a documentation for the people, or for all the developers that are writing integrations based on our Go service template, on how to migrate from the old version to the new version. So the most important change, and this is also kind of a summary of what's new in Keptn 0.8, is that we've migrated to a newer version of Cloud Events. We are now on Cloud Events version 1.0, which is reflected in the Cloud Events SDK Go V2. So we're not the only ones that are mixing spec versions, or that have mixed spec versions versus releases of libraries. So that's good to see here, but that's this change. And then, while in the old version of Keptn, we rely on Go utils /package/lib for many of our helper functions and cloud events, we have introduced a new package called packagelib v020, which includes all the structs, names, and utility functions you need to implement the new cloud events, basically. And just as an example, I'll go down to the test triggered event. This is what the test triggered event, it's kind of an event that didn't exist before, to be honest, but this is what it looks like now. You basically pass in a Keptn handler, you have your incoming cloud event, and you have your cloud event data, which is a test triggered event data, and then you can start processing the event like you did before. All right, there's a lot more changes into this pull request. So if you're interested into the details, please take a look into this pull request. It should be quite complete. Or if you just want to wait until we have the documentation, then that should be a lot easier, because this pull request obviously covers like all possible cloud events that you need to go through, and not just the ones that you might need. All right. Any questions so far on that, or any remarks? Cool. The next one I want to share with you is that we've created a new GitHub action. Actually, this is the first GitHub action that we've created officially under the Keptn organization. This action is a helper for our internal or for our GitHub CI pipeline that we're working with. And all it does is it extracts the branch name based on the pull request that somebody is doing. And the logic is as follows. Or actually, let's jump into the usage example here. You can extract the branch name by using the GitHub action like this, and then it provides outputs via the GitHub Actions outputs feature, and those outputs are the git commit hash branch slug, so a short and cleaned or sanitized version of the branch name, and the branch name itself. And if this is a pull request that this action is running on, then this will be the pull request ID, or rather it will be PR-pull request ID. So this helps for automation, like I want to build a Docker image for a pull request and I want to publish this Docker image, then it needs to have a good name or a proper version, and this helps for generating such a version. And basically this is the action, and the one that's more interesting to look at is the pull request of our actual CI pipeline. So we're using this action right now in production. Basically what I did is, this is the bash script that was in our workflow for CI. And with Keptn itself, we obviously have the mantra of let's not write a bash script, or let's not write a script, but let's rather make something containerized or something testable, something reusable. And this is exactly what we did here. We basically just say, hey, I want to use this GitHub action that the Keptn team has published. And with that, I also want to come to the conclusion. If you want to use such an action, you can obviously use our action. This is basically publicly available for everyone. So this is not just for us. Everyone can use it. And if you Google how to extract the branch name from a GitHub action, you will come across, well, I guess you will come across this code and maybe this code. And we just pack this into an action, basically. All right. Any questions on that? Cool. With that, I'll hand over to Florian.
All right, thank you. Okay, today I have 3 items to show you. The first one is a pretty cool extension for the distributor. So as you know, the distributor up until now was mainly responsible for subscribing to Keptn events. So for example, a deployment at finished event or evaluation finished event, or triggered events as well, in case you want to write a action executor and perform a certain task that's been scheduled by the shipyard controller. And the distributor is basically the best way to do so. So you can run it as a sidecar within the same pod as your Keptn service. So that's the best practice that we recommend, to have them within the same pod. And then the distributor will forward the events you are subscribed to the Keptn service. Now, what we've added to the distributor is a function to act as a proxy to the Keptn API. So that means, for example, if you are operating a Keptn service outside of the actual cluster where Keptn is running on, you can use the distributor to forward or to send API requests to the distributor, and then the distributor will take care of communicating with the Keptn API. So that means you only have to configure the access credentials to the Keptn API, so the Keptn API endpoint, and of course the Keptn API token in the distributor, but you don't have to handle all that credential information within the Keptn service. So within the Keptn service, if you run it within the same pod as the distributor, you can just access those free API services within Keptn via those URLs. So for example, if you want to communicate with the MongoDB data store, you can then access that via HTTP localhost 8081 and / MongoDB data store. Or for convenience, we also provide different synonyms for those services. So for example, /data store or /event store will also be mapped to that API service. And the same for the configuration service. So this one is available under those free paths, and the shipyard controller will be available via /shipyard and /shipyard controller. And yeah, also as part of this pull request, I've tried to rework all the environment variables and see which ones are not necessary anymore and which ones were maybe duplicated for similar purposes. And now that list of parameters is up to date. And as you can see, it is quite long, but fortunately for most of the usual use cases, it is sufficient to only set a very small subset of them. So here we have added 2 examples of how you might want to use them. So the first one is if you are running your Keptn service within the same cluster, you basically only need to set the pub/sub recipient. So that is the host name of your Keptn service. The port it is listening for events on, and then the path, and of course the pub/sub topic. And also the good news is if you of course run your Keptn service within the same pod and for example use our Go service template that Christian just showed us, you also can leave those 3 parameters here empty, because per default the distributor will be set up to correctly send incoming events to the default host that and important path that the Keptn service is listening on. All right, and the second scenario is if you want to operate your Keptn service outside of the Keptn cluster, you obviously need to know how to communicate with the Keptn API. So in that case, for the distributor, you need to set the Keptn API endpoint and the API token variable. Then you can also set the interval in which the distributor will poll for new triggered events, but that can also be left empty. So we have a default of, I think 10 or 30 seconds. I think it's 10. So you don't necessarily have to set that. Then, yeah, those 3 parameters are the same as above. So again, if you use the Go service template and run within the same pod, you can leave those empty. And then of course you need to set a pub/sub topic. The only limitation right now that we have here, if you run the distributor and the Keptn service outside of the cluster, you cannot use nuts wildcard syntax. So in that case, you have to specify each topic or each event type you're interested in specifically, and you can separate, you can pass multiple topics by separating them with a comma. All right, are there any questions about that?
I do have one. It's a pretty amazing, pretty big thing. I do have one question on the beginning of when you shared the different URLs for the same thing. If I was just wondering if it is a bit confusing, especially for the MongoDB data store, since first we have the MongoDB data store, but also data store is available, and then event store, but written a little bit differently with the hyphen. If it kind of introduces a little bit of or might introduce more confusion, then it might help if it's, because data store and event store could mean kind of different things for different people. That the data store is something like where you really log some data or put some data, and the event store is obviously something where you only have events. And maybe, but it's just my opinion that maybe keep the names that we usually had, and I think we always called it the MongoDB data store, and just go with MongoDB data store.
That's a good point. The reason behind this, why I did it like that, is we do have an open discussion about renaming the paths to our core or to our API services. And here I wanted to maybe think ahead a little bit, and in case we do, for example, rename the MongoDB data store to /data store, you can already use that path and do not have to update it afterwards. So, but maybe it is a little bit confusing. So,
okay, yeah, maybe I take a look at the ongoing discussions and take a look what is the outcome of this, and then we can maybe streamline.
Yeah.
I'm also on Jürgen's opinion here, and actually, if you now take multiple routes here, you are reserving those words or routes for future development. So if you really want, then URL which is called just config or configuration or data store, this changes behavior then, because it's already reserved for the MongoDB event store basically. So I would not go with multiple paths here. But what's a good idea is to replace, in my opinion, the word MongoDB data store with event store, and then it should just be event store.
Yeah, of course, we can also remove those options and only provide one path. So it's,
yeah, at the end, it should be aligned with the API. And this is what we have ongoing, and we are talking about, discussing about. But what I don't like is exposing technical details. And this is, for example, where we have the /MongoDB data store. Why should we expose the information that internally we are using a MongoDB? This should not be part of the endpoint. But this is the topic of another story. Sorry.
Here, what we can maybe do here really for 0.8 switch basically to event store, which is the clean path, so to say, and have it for backwards compatibility, have also the MongoDB data store still, which is just redirecting, of course, to the event store. And in the next version, then we could get rid of that MongoDB data store path because, because recently you've mentioned it's yeah, exposing technical details, and also for the other stuff we don't do that. For example, the configuration service is just a configuration service and not the, I don't know, Git service or something like that.
I like this idea.
all right, then let's continue. So the next issue is quite a small one. So basically here the requirement for that was, since we now are switching to different event types, and one of them is the evaluation.finished, which will now replace the previous evaluation done event. We needed to remove all the references to the old event types. So for example, in our integration tests, we had several places where we still referenced those evaluation done events. And in this PR, I basically went through all the places where that occurred and remove the references to those events. So nothing too spectacular here, but are there any questions about that? All right, if not, let's continue with the last one. So this one is also not a really big pull request or a big issue. So basically the requirement here was that whenever a task sequence is triggered, so when a new task sequence, the triggered event is coming into the shipyard controller, it needs to check the version of the shipyard of the project this incoming event is related to. And of course, if the shipyard does not have the correct version, the shipyard controller should exit with a task sequence that finished event with a status of errored and result failed. So also the code here is not that complicated. We can have a quick look. So basically, first we try to get the shipyard, and then what has been added here is the shipyard controller will then validate the shipyard version, and in case it does not match with the expected version, it will send out the finished event. So that's basically all there is to that issue. Are there any questions about that? All right, if not, let's have a quick look at the working items, because there have been a few bugs I fixed as well in this week. So the first one was an interesting one. So that was a memory leak in the shipyard controller. And that was caused by, yeah, actually I discovered that when I was developing this new functionality for the distributor, where it pulled open the triggered events via the shipyard controller. There I noticed that the shipyard controller for each request tried to create a new MongoDB connection and didn't close it properly. And I fixed that with that PR, and also where Dynatrace helped me to validate the fix I've made is I could use it to have a look at the memory consumption of the service. So that is before the fix. So as you can see here, very nicely, the memory grew, then the pod crashed because of an OM error, then the memory grew again, and that kept on happening. Then I made the fix, and after that it looked like this. So of course, at the beginning, the memory grew a little bit because it needed to establish the connections to the MongoDB, for example. But then, even though the number of requests was steady and there were more and more requests coming in, the memory consumption stayed the same. So that's, again, a very nice example of how Dynatrace enables you to, or enables us to self-monitor Keptn and actually use it to develop Keptn and have an eye on performance issues. All right, and then I think there was another one. Exactly, so we also discovered a small bug in the Helm service, where in the deployment finished events, it was not sending. In the deployment finished events, we do have the property deployment URI local, which is the URI within the cluster where the service that was just deployed is reachable. And in that case, we discovered that the port within the URI was not set correctly. So it was actually hard coded to 80. And I fixed that with that PR. So basically what I did here is, for example, when we have this, this service definition here, so this is the Kubernetes service specification. We actually look at the created Kubernetes service resource and go through all the ports, and then we take the proper port. So in that example, it is 80, but for example, if the created service is exposed at port 9000, for example, then the Helm service will take that the port that is defined here. All right, I think that's it from my side. So I'm handing over to Bernd.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. First question, is this big enough to see?
That's good.
Okay. I've picked only one issue which I think is worth mentioning today here. I've worked on this in the last week, and I think the pull request is still open, but I can show you that one. And it's about a new, I think, very convenient feature, especially in development phase, where you can use the CLI to basically watch the event stream of some of the commands you've issued via the CLI. What do you mean by that? Let's look at my environment here. I have a locally compiled version of my CLI. And on my cluster, I have just one service, the cards.db from the examples running here in stage dev. And let's just send a new artifact for this service. You all know, of course, the send event new artifact command. What's new here, you can actually provide here a -w flag, which means a watch flag. And if you do that, you can actually watch the events which are resulting from your command. So you see the CLI is not terminating here. It is basically continuing to poll for events which are resulting. You see just one event came in here additionally, and I think that was already the last event. So this is useful if you just want to take a look what events are firing in the system when you do certain stuff on your cluster via the CLI.
Bernd?
Yes.
Do you have JQ installed on your system, the command line tool JQ?
Maybe.
Perfect. Can you just use the command that you used before and pipe it into JQ?
Like that?
Yeah. Let's see if that... too bad.
Okay, that's probably because the first line says something about incompatible version, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, probably we will have to check. I think if we print it to std error, then only the JSON payloads will be parsed. But we should take a look at this because with JQ, this gets an awesome formatting and colorized and everything. Makes it really nice for demos.
Yeah, that's actually another topic we need you to address. So this one should probably not go into that standard, into that stream, so that we have machine processable output actually. But I think there's an issue for that. What you can do here is, because you can also output this by the YAML in the YAML format, which is, in my opinion, much cleaner than the JSON output. So I've just issued here the same event new artifact with YAML, and you see it's quite fast. Already finished again. It outputs the stuff in YAML. What else can you do? Of course, there are...
Sorry for interrupting. I think it's pretty cool but the only thing or that might be missing is a kind of a delimiter, so that JQ or any YAML formatting, that they know when the event starts and event ends, because I think maybe in the payload, in the JSON payload, just a comma between the events, or maybe have it as an array and then a comma between the events so you can process it. And 3 dashes here between the events. But I'm not 100% sure. But just
that's a good point. Thank you. Where was I? Yes, you can actually use that W flag also in other commands. If I take a look at Keptn, let's see, Keptn get. Oh. Keptn event here, Keptn get event. We need to pass in a Keptn context for which the events get filtered. Let's just look at this one. And it should give us the exact same list here afterwards.
So this fetches all the previous events and then keeps on watching for new ones, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And what you can also do, actually, you see this one, the default behavior of this command or of this flag is it will fetch events for an infinite amount of time. Probably you want to stop after 5 seconds. You can do that with by the -- watch time flag, and now it should actually stop after 5 seconds. It did stop here. So where's this command else available, or this flag? I think it's the send new artifact command, which we already saw. Then the get event, and you can also issue this one, this flag with the start evaluation command. So it should also be reflected in the help. Keptn get event.
There's a typo in event.
Event, okay, sorry. Okay, like this. You see here the description of this flag. Minus dub or minus watch, print event stream, or here the timeout, which defaults to max int or something like that, and it's in second. That's basically it. I think this feature is, especially when you're developing stuff and want to try out things and see what events are fired in the system, it's quite useful. I already use it to trace, so to say, the events when I develop a new feature. So this was incorporated already in the CLI, as you saw. The pull request for this is still opened. The main logic for this is implemented in Go utils. When you're developing a service and you want to use this feature, you want to just repeatedly poll for events filtered by some filter. You can use the implementation here. I've updated the README file in the Go utils. Until now, it was only possible to query events from the event store. This was done like shown here. You basically creating an event handler. You create a filter, and then you ask the event handler to fetch the events which are matching the filter. Now what you can do is you can wrap, so to say, the event filter with a event watcher. You can create it like this, new event watcher. You can, of course, provide it with an event filter, like the same like above. You can provide it with an interval, so that you can control how often or in which interval the watcher will fetch. You have 5 seconds. So this stuff is all optional. If you don't provide it, there are defaults for that. You can provide it with a start time. So the oldest event will then just fetched from this timestamp here. And you can also provide a timeout, for example, 15 seconds. If you have your watcher, you can just start watching. You provide it with a Go context, and it will return you and Go channel. Here, all events. And you can just loop over this channel to get the events then. It will also provide you, it's not shown here, a cancel function where you can actively cancel the polling if you need to. So
Very nice.
that's how you can use it. I think it's a good component if you want to support such a use case, that we have now something which we can reuse and which is basically bulletproof. And because there are lots of things which can go wrong, we should not do this every time from scratch. So please reuse this event watcher or extend it if new features are needed here. And that's exactly how it's also implemented or incorporated in the CLI. It's basically just this code. That's it. Okay, that's from my side. If there are no questions, I will stop my sharing.
Cool. Yeah, thanks everyone. And thanks, Bernd. Are there any other comments, questions for this community and developer meeting?
Just to add to the discussion about JQ, I just checked. You don't need a comma. JQ works fine. It's really just a log message at the beginning. So,
Perfect.
yeah.
Cool. Okay, so if there is nothing to add here, then thanks everyone for joining, and see you all again next week, next Thursday. And please everyone go ahead and try out the alpha release and watch the videos from Christian that will give you a good head start on the new format of the shipyard file. Okay, thanks everyone. See you next week.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, bye.